The hearing chamber pulsed with heat and tension, despite the Capitol's aggressively cool air conditioning. It was supposed to be another bureaucratic formality, a procedural line-item review, dull enough to drift into CSPA in obscurity. Press had barely filled half the gallery. Congressional aides glanced at their phones. Cameras scanned the room. Unfocused. Then Jasmine Crockett adjusted her microphone. A stillness settled over the Oversight Committee room. She didn't shuffle papers. She didn't fidget. She sat, spine straight, gaze unblinking, lips slightly parted like someone choosing her first word with surgical care. Across from her sat Kevin McCarthy. Former Speaker of the House, leaned back in his chair with that half-smile he wore like armor. He'd already spoken accusing Crockett of manipulating a supplemental spending report tied to the Biden administration. He hadn't said it outright, but the insinuation bled through every syllable. Fraud, fabrication. Cover dash up, he referenced. A classified document, something he claimed had been leaked to his office. The phrase had been vague enough to avoid legal consequence, but damning enough for media. Pickup. Jasmine hadn't flinched then. She hadn't objected. She let him speak, but now her hand reached. Slowly for the leather bag beneath her chair, reporters lifted their cameras. A soft murmur rippled through the gallery. From inside, she pulled out a thick yellow folder. No official seal. No high-security envelope. Just 3 sharp black letters scrawled in permanent marker. Receipts. She laid it on the desk and flipped it open. A single page faced the ceiling, bold text, a date. Then she pressed the screen share button on the embedded monitor. Behind her, projection flickered to life. A full-color PDF of an email chain, one that would soon send shockwaves through every news cycle. She spoke, quietly but firmly. This isn't politics. This is perjury. And I'm tired of pretending. It's anything less. McCarthy blinked. Cameras clicked louder. Crockett's voice didn't rise. It sliced. The so-called classified document doesn't exist. But what does exist, Mr. McCarthy, is a record of your staff drafting this lie 6 days ago. Before any hearing, before any leak. The room froze. She turned to the committee chair. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit into evidence exhibits A through F, including internal memos, a voicemail transcript, and communications between Mr. McCarthy's office and partisan media outlets. The chair hesitated, caught between parliamentary protocol and the undertow of something larger. Crockett didn't wait. The American people are tired of these dog and pony shows. They deserve clarity. And today, they're going to get it. Lie hadn't begun in the chamber. It had grown in the dark, cultivated in whispers, nurtured by selective leaks, and fertilized by clickbait journalism that never bothered to verify. For weeks, Kevin McCarthy had been building a quiet narrative. One tweet here, one offhand remark there. He was rebranding himself, not just as the comeback king after his fall from the speakership, but as the unrelenting watchdog of fiscal abuse. The $2.7 billion emergency infrastructure supplement bill was the perfect tool. On paper, it looked routine. Funds allocated for storm-damaged highways and collapsing public transit systems. But McCarthy's team massaged the story. Alleged reallocation, hidden clauses, and suspicious timing. They fed. This 2 media outlets on the fringe, places that didn't need evidence, only suggestion. He named no names at first. Just let the suspicions swell, but then he pounced in a closed-door pre-hearing huddle. He'd handed out a 1-sheet to friendly press, Crockett's name red-circled, underlined in black. The sheet referenced a confidential whistleblower, and a classified memo Crockett had allegedly kept from the committee. The term classified did the work. Most Americans didn't know that budget memos weren't classified in the traditional sense. But McCarthy counted on that confusion, and then the bombshell in the hearing. He said it plainly. We have strong reason to believe Representative Crockett knowingly withheld classified documentation from this body, and that she was aware of fiscal misdirection under her oversight. It landed like a gut punch. The gallery shifted. Crockett blinked once. That was all. What McCarthy didn't know was that while he played theater, she had been preparing for court. Her staff had pulled server logs, FOIA requests, scheduling inconsistencies. Analyzed metadata from emails that Republican aides never thought would be scrutinized. Her war chest wasn't for headlines. It was for war now. As the gallery watched the exhibits come to life on the projection screen, Jasmine Crockett uncoiled. "This wasn't carelessness," she said. "This was scripted. Months in the making. He didn't find a leak. He planted one." Behind her, the evidence spoke louder than any gavel. The RNC memo on screen showed specific wording. Frame Crockett as reckless with oversight. Undermine her legal credibility. Focus on classified confusion most Americans won't know. The difference, Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You thought the lie would spread faster than the truth could catch it? But I've been sprinting, Mr. McCarthy, and I brought the receipts." McCarthy exhaled through his nose, leaning forward. His hands folded like a man trying to contain a storm inside his ribs. "You think you've scared me?" he said, his voice low, almost paternal. She tilted her head, the faintest curl at the edge of her mouth. "No," she replied. "I think I've cornered you." A ripple passed through the crowd. Committee members exchanged glances, not the usual partisan contempt, but something subtler. Hesitation, curiosity, the first scent of blood in the water, because for the first time, it's in a long while, Kevin McCarthy didn't look untouchable. He looked like a man who had gambled on perception and lost the bet. Jasmine Crockett didn't move quickly. She didn't need to. Turn of the page from her folder landed with the weight of a closing cell door. The yellow file sat like a quiet threat on the desk, not thick with speculation, but with precision. Exhibit A had already landed. The RNC memo revealing the calculated character assassination. Now came Exhibit B. She raised her hand slightly, cueing her aide. The screen behind her flickered again. Call log appeared. McCarthy's senior policy advisor, 11:42 a.m., 3 days before the alleged leak. Calling a notorious partisan blog editor. The same blog that had been the first to run the story. Smearing her credibility. Jasmine's voice was calm, nearly surgical. This call lasted 19 minutes. According to phone tower data, it originated from the Rayburn House office building, and the recipient, editor-in-chief of Freedom First. Gasps didn't erupt, they seeped. Quiet, involuntary reactions. A staffer in the second row fumbled their pen. A camera clicked, almost apologetically. She clicked forward again. Exhibit C. An email thread between that same advisor and McCarthy's legislative chief. Marked draft narrative, with Crockett's name repeatedly highlighted in yellow. Underlined phrases included shifting focus from policy to trustworthiness and engage OMB classification ambiguity. Crockett paused. "Let's be clear. This wasn't an investigation. This was an orchestration." McCarthy finally moved. He leaned forward, fingers threading together, eyes scanning the screen like he could will it to change. Jasmine turned back to the audience. "There is no classified memo. There is no whistleblower. But there is a premeditated plan to discredit a member of this body using the illusion of scandal." She looked over her shoulder at the chair, her tone sharpening like flint on steel, and there's more. The next exhibit didn't come in writing. It came in sound. A soft chime indicated the start of a voicemail. Tinny, muffled, but clear. "Enough to recognize? We're going to say she cooked the numbers. Doesn't matter if we can prove it. Just get it out before Friday." The voice was unmistakable. The inflection, the cadence, the tone of practiced political strategy. No name. Had to be said. Everyone in that room had heard Kevin McCarthy speak for years. They knew the voice. They knew the intent. And now they heard the lie, unguarded, unfiltered. An undeniable Jasmine let it hang in the air for 3 full seconds before speaking. This voicemail was left on the phone of a former policy analyst, who quit 2 days later. And the metadata confirms it was sent from a government-issued device under McCarthy's office domain. She tapped the folder once, gently. Receipts. McCarthy's chair creaked as he shifted uncomfortably. His jaw clenched. "You can wave your papers all day," he growled. Barely above a whisper. Jasmine didn't blink. "I don't need to wave them. I just need them on the record." The chair interjected then, requesting a brief recess. but it was too late. The courtroom wasn't just hearing testimony anymore. It was watching the scaffolding around Kevin McCarthy collapse and Jasmine Crockett, cool and unflinching, holding the blueprint of every beam he'd built it with. She leaned back slightly, folded her hands, and said nothing, because the truth was finally speaking for itself. The documents proved intent. The voicemail confirmed deception. But Jasmine Crockett knew this wasn't just about facts, it was about frames. McCarthy hadn't just lied. He had chosen her specifically, and that choice wasn't arbitrary. As the exhibits dimmed on the screen behind her, Jasmine didn't dive into another document. She let the air settle. She let the silence breathe. Then she spoke. This wasn't about budgetary oversight. This was about power, and who you believe deserves to hold it. The voice didn't waver. It didn't accuse. It revealed. When people like me speak with authority, she said, eyes locked on McCarthy, we are called aggressive. When we defend ourselves, we're called angry. When we present evidence, we're called emotional. But when you lie, you're called strategic. A murmur rolled through the gallery. Several journalists began scribbling furiously. McCarthy leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed, lips pressed so tightly together, it looked like he might crack a tooth. Jasmine continued. This isn't just about me. This is about every woman, every black woman, every young professional in this country who's been told that their competence is threatening their confidence. Dangerous. She paused, letting her words settle deep into the room. And it's about the men who mistake that confidence for something they have a right to dismantle. The room had gone silent, not the awkward, procedural kind of silence, but the raw, rattled stillness that follows truth delivered without apology. Mick's shirt opened his mouth as if to interject. But Jasmine lifted a single hand without looking. At him, don't. I let you talk. I let you frame me. I let you weaponize the press. And now I'm reclaiming the floor. She walked toward the monitor, clicking back to Exhibit A. This wasn't sloppiness. It was strategy. Plan designed to discredit an opponent by playing into tropes. He didn't just question my numbers. He questioned my legitimacy. She turned back to the committee, and that is the most dangerous lie of all. Because when truth gets filtered through bias, it becomes poison. One of the junior Republican members cleared his throat, visibly shaken, eyes darting away. Jasmine softened slightly, not in tone, but in texture. I am not your enemy, she said. I'm your colleague, but I will not under any condition allow you to use the weight of this institution to erase my integrity while you hide behind yours. The gallery was still. Even the cameras, humming quietly on their tripods, felt subdued. McCarthy didn't respond. Not yet, not here. Because, for the first time in that chamber, it wasn't just a hearing. It was a reckoning, and Jasmine Crockett wasn't defending herself anymore. She was putting the system on trial. The silence broke like glass. Representative Salvatore Drennan, a conservative hardliner from Arizona with a flair for ambush politics, cleared his throat sharply and leaned into his mic. If the gentlewoman from Texas is done with her monologue, he began, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Some of us still have questions about fiscal transparency, and Jasmine didn't blink. Transparency begins with truth. If you're not ready for that, perhaps you should yield your time. A half-stifled laugh echoed from the back of the gallery. The chairwoman tapped her gavel once, not in discipline, but to steady the room. Pressed forward, attempting control. You accuse Mr. McCarthy of intentional deception? Are you now suggesting this entire committee is part of a coordinated attack on your reputation? She tilted her head. I don't need to suggest what the record already shows. He flinched slightly. I'm suggesting that when powerful, men amplify lies about women of color in public office, she said, walking slowly along the witness table. It is rarely accidental, and never without consequence. McCarthy finally spoke. I never mentioned your race. I never mentioned your gender. I questioned your numbers. His voice was controlled, but to calm. Calculated, Jasmine turned to him. You weaponized implication. Knew exactly how your phrasing would be interpreted by the media. You knew which dog whistles to blow, and you did it anyway. McCarthy leaned in. Congresswoman, I deal in facts, not feelings. She smiled coldly. Then let's stay with the facts. She held up the printed timeline again. Your office released a statement to the Hill 2 hours before this committee's internal review was complete, preemptively accusing my team of misleading accounting. That phrase was lifted verbatim from a far-right blog that published its article yesterday morning. She tossed the paper onto the table. So either you leaked that false claim before any investigation occurred, or you're following the lead of political hit jobs online. McCarthy didn't answer. He looked at the chairwoman. Are we going to allow her to? The chairwoman held up a hand. She has the floor. Answer the question. He sat back silent. Jasmine's voice sharpened like a blade. You've spent your career undermining people who challenge the status quo. But when you came for me, you didn't expect I'd fight back in the language of receipts. Now it was Drennan who leaned forward again. You're making this personal. Is personal, she said. Because the consequences of these lies aren't theoretical. They follow us home. They become threats. They become attacks. They become obstacles for every young woman of color who sees someone like me and dares to believe she belongs in this building. Across the room, CSPA's live feed was catching it all. Viewers were already flooding Twitter with hashtags. On MSNBC, a chyron would soon read, Crockett confronts McCarthy live on Hill. But in that room, the gravity wasn't digital. It was human. The chairwoman finally intervened. Let's return to the evidence. Representative Crockett, you have 5 minutes left. Jasmine nodded. Then let's get to the part they've all been avoiding. She pulled up one final file on the monitor. Internal correspondence from a former McCarthy staffer now. A whistleblower sent to the Oversight Committee just 2 nights ago. It shows coordination between GOP leadership aides and external media groups to pre-frame this hearing as a fiscal embarrassment for me. Before any documents had even been submitted. Gasps. Audible ones. This time, even the Republican aides whispered among themselves. McCarthy looked stunned, not at the claim, but at the timing. He hadn't expected that card to be played. Not here, not now. But Jasmine's voice didn't rise. Told you came prepared with a smear. I came prepared with the truth. As she sat back down, the chairwoman glanced down at her gavel, but didn't move it. There was no need to signal silence. The room was already frozen, because the crossfire wasn't just rhetorical anymore, it had become radioactive, and everyone in that chamber knew whatever came next would change careers. The committee recessed under the weight of its own tension. No one declared it formally. There was no motion or gavel. People simply stood up, wandered, disappeared. The air had become too thick to breathe protocol. Jasmine stepped out through the side corridor, her heels clicking sharply against the old marble, every footstep measured, not to be dramatic, but because her hands were still shaking. Behind her, aides swarmed like bees kicked from a hive. Phones lit up with headlines. Staffers whispered by the vending machines, glancing around before exchanging theories. Did she really get a whistleblower? How the hell did she time that like that? She ducked into a quieter hallway, the kind where old portraits hung of dead men in powdered wigs who never imagined a woman like her would walk these walls. Her eyes locked briefly with the oil-painted eyes of one of them, then turned away. A familiar voice caught up. Damn, murmured her chief of staff, Darren, stepping beside her. You dropped a tactical nuke and didn't even flinch. Flinching now, she said quietly. He handed her a sealed water bottle. McCarthy didn't even blink for a full 10 seconds. You had him cornered. She didn't smile. They don't stay cornered for long. He'll spin it by morning. Darren glanced at his phone, already trying. Go. There's a quote going around that your entire performance was pre-scripted and theatrical. She turned to him. Theatrical. Her voice cracked with disbelief. You think I wanted to drag this into the open? That I enjoy having my name torn apart for sport? Darren didn't answer. He didn't need to. Further down the corridor, Senator Wells passed by. Pausing for a moment, you shook the table, Crockett, he said. They don't like when the table shakes. She nodded politely. Maybe the table needed flipping. He smiled faintly, then moved on. Jasmine leaned against the wall, across the rotunda. The press had already formed their semicircle outside the chamber doors. Camera flashes sparked intermittently. Microphones stretched over the ropes like flowers toward the sun. Darren kept checking his phone, scrolling, pausing. The whistleblower memo's already leaked, and the receipts. Trending #1. Twitter, who leaked it? No idea. It could have been friendly fire. Or maybe McCarthy wanted it out first. Control the framing. She ran a hand through her hair. He's not going to stop, Darren said, but neither are you. She glanced at the clock above the chamber entrance. 5 minutes until recess ended. Behind her, the buzz of reporters grew louder. Somewhere in the distance, the Capitol bell chimed for the hour. It sounded like ceremony. It's like warning. She stepped forward slowly. You know what worries me? She said, quieter now. Not that they'll come after me again, that I'm getting used to it. Darren didn't try to reassure her. He just walked beside her, shoulder to shoulder, as she made her way back into the fray. The hallway narrowed. The doors grew closer. The hearing wasn't over. But the whispers in the halls told the story already. Something had shifted, and no one, not Jasmine, not McCarthy, not the country, would leave this room the same way they entered. The moment Jasmine re-entered the chamber, the tone had changed. Not louder, quieter, but not calm. It was the hush before a tornado. It's a strained silence of political decorum struggling to contain emotional wreckage. The chairwoman, Representative Dolores Mendel, a sharp, silver-haired veteran of Congress who had once marched for civil rights and now wielded procedure like a sword, hadn't spoken since the moment Jasmine dropped the whistleblower documents. Until now. She cleared her throat. The room turned as one. Her gavel struck twice, not just for attention, but to reassert control. The committee will come to order, she said, voice deliberate, slow. I've allowed a great deal of latitude this morning, perhaps more than I should have. After reviewing the developments during recess, it's clear this is no longer a standard oversight hearing. McCarthy sat back in his chair, arms crossed, lips tight. He wasn't even trying to hide the scowl now. Mendel turned her gaze slowly across the room, first to Jasmine, then to McCarthy, and then to the press gallery. Packed tighter than usual, lenses glinting like judgment, Representative Crockett Mendel said firmly, You introduced material during the first half of this session which, if verified, raises serious questions of ethics and legality. Jasmine rose from her seat. Yes, Madam Chair. And you are prepared to authenticate the origin of those materials? I am, she replied. The documents were obtained through a whistleblower connected to a federal contract tied to McCarthy's district. Their identity has been verified through encrypted correspondence and corroborated by independent procurement records. McCarthy broke in. This is political theater. But Mendel raised her gavel. You'll be recognized when I say you are. He froze. Not from respect, from calculation. The cameras were watching. Mendel turned back to Jasmine. Invoking Rule 7C, this committee will enter executive review for the next 24 hours. The documents you submitted will be sequestered for preliminary legal examination. Jasmine nodded, understood. Mendel leaned back. For a beat, her eyes softened, just slightly. Congresswoman Crockett, you've been a thorn in many sides since the day you arrived, she said. A quiet murmur ran through the room. But let me be clear. If what you've submitted today is accurate, then the American public has the right to know. And if it's not, there will be consequences. Jasmine didn't blink. I came here to serve truth, even when it costs. McCarthy couldn't take it anymore. He stood, and what truth is that? The truth you manufacture on social media? The truth that gets you clicks? You're not a legislator. You're an influencer with a microphone. Jasmine faced him, slowly. I'd rather be an influencer with integrity than a politician with none. The crowd gasped. Even some staffers stifled. Smirks. But Mendel cut in again, gavel hammering once more. This is not a debate. This is an inquiry. McCarthy sat down. Seething Mendel turned once more to the room. This committee will now recess until tomorrow morning. All members are hereby instructed to review the sealed packet distributed by the clerk's office. This hearing is not adjourned. It is just beginning. She stood. The gavel dropped one final time. People began shuffling papers, standing, murmuring. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As Jasmine turned to leave, she caught Mendel's eyes. Again, there was no smile there, only something deeper. A kind of reluctant respect. The kind earned, not given. Outside, the hallway buzzed like a disturbed beehive. But inside Jasmine's chest was only one sound, the quiet thump of a line crossed. And the long road of what that meant. Night fell. But Washington didn't sleep. Somewhere between the glowing Capitol dome and the shadowed alleyways behind Press Row, something cracked. Jasmine's team had obeyed the executive review rules, silent, disciplined, airtight, but someone hadn't. At 2:16 a.m., a red notification pinged the encrypted chat on her burner phone. Politico just ran it. Full leak, all 67 pages. Whistleblower's ID still safe. But it's out. Jasmine sat up straight in bed, blinking in the darkness. The room was still, except for the faint glow of the phone and the roaring in her ears, her chief of staff. Maya was already typing. I didn't leak it, neither did legal. Could be committee staff. Or McCarthy's side trying to control the spin. Jasmine tossed back the covers, adrenaline sharpening every edge. Meet me at the Hill. Now by 3 a.m., CNN, MSNBC, and even Fox had picked it up. Headlines screamed across the tickers. Explosive allegations tie Representative McCarthy to phantom contracts. Shadowpack's whistleblower docs detail $8 million in untraceable funds. The narrative had escaped its cage. When Jasmine arrived at the Capitol steps, camera crews were already staking their ground, coffee in one hand, tripods in the other. She kept her coat tight and head high as Maya pulled up beside her. "We need to be careful," Maya said, her voice low. "You don't know who dropped it. They could spin it." I don't care who leaked it," Jasmine replied, her voice flint and fire. "Glad it's out." "And now we don't have to wait for the chairwoman's green light." Maya nodded. Then we go on offense." By sunrise, McCarthy was already on air, standing in front of the American flag like a man wronged by fate itself. "These so-called documents are political slander," he declared to a friendly morning host. "Fabricated by a radical wing of the party that wants to see this country burn from within." He looked directly into the camera, and to the people watching, "Don't be fooled. You are being lied to." But as he spoke, the screenshots were already trending. Emails with altered timestamps, a procurement officer's confession, a payment loop connecting 3 shell firms, all with ties to McCarthy's super PAC. And then the clip dropped. A video, just 22 seconds long. The whistleblower's voice distorted, identity protected. But the message cut like a knife. "I was told to reroute the funds. I asked if it was legal. My supervisor laughed and said, 'McCarthy gets what McCarthy wants.' That's when I knew. I had to come forward." The internet exploded. McCarthy money trail Crockett was right shadow. Pia scandal Jasmine didn't celebrate. She stood in her office, watching the nation react, a storm of truth and chaos spiraling outward, and knew it had only just begun. Because leaks don't just expose corruption, they force lines to be drawn. The chairwoman's office called by mid-morning. Her tone was dry, controlled, but Jasmine could hear it, the barely restrained fury underneath. "You didn't leak it?" "Ma'am, I found out when everyone else did." Pause. "Then, well, the court of public opinion has convened. God help us all." Outside the Capitol, protesters were already gathering. Not a mob, not yet. But signs waved in the wind like early omens. "We demand the audit. Crockett stands, we stand. No more ghost money in our democracy." Somewhere, a reporter shouted Jasmine's name. Flashbulbs cracked like distant thunder. But she didn't stop. Because once truth breaks loose, it doesn't go back in the vault. It rips through power like wildfire. And Jasmine Crockett was walking straight into the fire. The chamber was a furnace, not in temperature, but in tension, thick, breathless, flammable. Reporters filled the back rows. Legal aids lined the periphery. C-SPAN cameras blinked red, feeding to a country now addicted to every word of the unraveling scandal. And at the center of it all, Jasmine Crockett sat composed, spine straight, jaw locked, a warrior with receipts. Across from her, under oath, sat Philip Renshaw, the deputy procurement director from the Department of Energy and the first public domino. He didn't look like a villain, balding, late 50s, nervous hands, and polished shoes. But his email had been on the leaked memo. His signature had authorized the redirection of nearly $3.2 million to a shell corporation with no employees and no physical office. Mr. Renshaw. Jasmine began, voice calm but resonant, when you approved the funds for Civic Network Solutions, LLC, were you aware that the company was created just 13 days prior? He shifted uncomfortably. I had reason to believe the vendor was vetted. Vetted by whom? I can't say definitively. Jasmine tilted her head. The courtroom. Lights gleaming off her earrings like daggers. You were the final sign-off. You routed taxpayer money to a fake firm, and you're telling this body you don't know who told you to do it? Renshaw's lips parted. No sound. I'll remind you, you are under oath, she said, each word a nail in the wood. So, I'll ask again, who instructed you? The room held its breath. Then, quietly, a call came in from the speaker's office. Gasps rippled down the line of press. Phones lit up like fireflies. Name. Renshaw looked ill. Sweat dotted his brow. Wesley Bain, he whispered. Special liaison to Speaker McCarthy. Boom. The chairwoman pounded the gavel, demanding order. Reporters leapt from their seats, whispering furiously into their recorders. But Jasmine wasn't done. She clicked a remote. The monitor behind her lit up an email chain dated 6 months ago, highlighted in yellow. Move the civic funds per Bain's directive. No paper trail. You know the drill. Do you deny writing this, Mr. Renshaw? He stared at the screen. His silence was an admission. Jasmine leaned forward. Would you consider this procurement process, quote, legal? Renshaw exhaled like a man surrendering something more than breath. No, it was illegal. Outside the chamber, the world reacted like a volcano bursting its lid. Every news outlet broke into programming. Headlines flew. McCarthy linked to fraud confirmed under oath. Bain named in explosive testimony. Crockett drops hammer. In interrogation of key witness inside, Jasmine stood still, controlled. But her knuckles whitened around the podium.